I bought a sword. I know, cliche white geek buying a sword. What a novelty. Next thing you know, I'm going to start spouting on about how woke Star Wars has gotten and then sell you on peptides. But that's not going to happen. At least not now. No, I want to tell you about how I bought a sword. A real sword. A sword made from Toledo steel. I was leading a group on a study abroad program through Spain, and we made a day trip to Toledo. If you have the chance, go. It's an hour train ride outside Madrid and is one of the most gorgeous little towns I've ever been in. But make sure you bring a good set of shoes because Toledo could go head to head with Edinburgh for the hardest walking town I've ever been in. We got off the train in the morning and made the walk to the medieval town. The old city is effectively a hilltop fortress surrounded by thick walls. And by hilltop, I don't mean some little grass-covered slope. I mean sheer, rocky cliffs with a river encircling it. High, too. It took well over 45 minutes to walk from the train station to the old town at the top of a great number of steps, but I highly recommend it. You pass through gorgeous bridges and walkways and really take in the scale of the city, something which is much harder to do after coughing up 10 euros for a taxi ride up the hill. And the first thing we saw were the sword sellers. Toledo became known for its swords all the way back to the time of the Crusades. I've always wanted a real Toledo sword and partially chose this destination just to buy one. You can find a wide variety too. Big swords, little swords, daggers and sabers, heavy swords, light swords, knives and rapiers. They had copies of King Arthur's sword, Gandalf's sword, even ninja swords. But as glorious as these would look on my wall, I wanted the real thing. I've always tried to live what could be described as an authentic life. I dislike things that look like something but aren't. Fake stuff, fake food, imitation junk. I didn't want something made in China, and I didn't want it made in a factory. I was in Toledo. What was the point of going there if the sword wasn't made there? And made the way it had been made for centuries. A real Toledo sword. I imagined myself being able to both hang a cool-looking sword on my wall, but also take it down and use it in the zombie apocalypse. After all, what's the point of a geek with a sword if it's too heavy to cleave a zombie's head off? And that was the thing about the factory-made swords. They were all very heavy, because heavy metal is cheaper. To make a sword out of real, usable steel, it needs to be light. I honestly would rather have no sword than a fake sword on my wall. I could come back, save up, try again. Toledo wasn't going anywhere, so I moved on. I searched a variety of shops that my students thankfully indulged me in. The narrow streets of Toledo very much feel like a medieval town with their rough cobbled paths, narrow lanes going up and down steep rocky inclines, and the occasional church that's twice as old as the United States. Just ignore the occasional Starbucks. It was in these narrow lanes that I came upon a shop with slightly less appealing looking swords. That intrigued me. No paint, no filigree, no fancy handles, just swords. Swords that looked like swords. Not some character's sword or a movie sword, just a sword. I asked to see one and held it. It was light. I found one I quite liked, and the shop owner immediately told me not to buy that one. He said I'd selected an English one, and that I was going to buy a real Toledo sword, as I said I wanted, I needed one in the Spanish style. What he showed me was love at first sight. Forgive the waxing of a man's love of a sword, but that's what it was. Immediate connection and love. I gave it a swing, and it felt like swinging paper, light and smooth. The shop owner took the sword back and did something I never expected. He bent it. He thrust it point down into the shop's wooden floors and leaned on the handle, bending the blade. But then he held it out to me and returned into place, undamaged and straight. The factory-made swords, they have iron in the middle, that's what he said. That's why they're so heavy and don't bend. If you can bend it, it's real steel. Sold. Of course, I wanted to do my due diligence and kept shopping, but that sword remained ever in my thoughts. A quick Google search narrowed my selection to a handful of other authentic shops. I found one that claimed to house one of only 2 remaining master blacksmiths in Toledo. The shopkeeper showed me a sword that was just a sword. It was marginally lighter and plainer too. She told me it was competition ready. I marveled that such a sword would actually be used in real-life competitions, the nature of which I had no idea, but still. This was a real sword. Something really used in some form of real sword-based competition. Hopefully one with padding. But even though this sword was marginally more expensive, I returned to that other store. You see, I didn't quite need something real. I just needed something real enough to actually use, but not something made for competition ready use. A real sword, but not a real sword, if that makes sense. So I returned to the real sword shop and asked more questions. The shop owner's name was Moreno, and his family had been in business for generations. And while the sword was real, I still wanted it to look good on my wall. So I asked if I could have it engraved. He said he would. So I bought it. I went to the Toledo Cathedral while he engraved it. That building is the most magnificent Gothic cathedral on earth, with soaring, narrow towers that will make you feel like you've stepped right into a scene from Game of Thrones. The whole city felt a bit like that. Medieval architecture frozen in time, but accessible to those whose knees can handle the incline. I returned to the shop, and my sword now read Moreno, Toledo, on the handle. Today it hangs on my wall. So be warned, zombies, I have a real Toledo sword. Not a real Toledo sword, but a real one.